Welcome to the All-Star Athlete Podcast, your guide to mastering the mental game and reaching your full potential.
Today's sponsor is Well Traveled. Whether you're grinding through long days, pushing your limits in training, or constantly on the move, your body takes a toll. Fatigue, hectic schedules, and changing environments can weaken your immune system. Give it a boost with Well Traveled, a drink mix with clean, clinically proven ingredients for immunity and no added sugar. It's a smarter alternative to Emergen-C. Just open a packet, mix with water, and enjoy. Right now, save 25% when you use the code ALLSTAR on the Well Traveled website. That's gowelltraveled.com/discount/AllStar. Again, save 25% when you use the code ALLSTAR on their website. Stay well on the go with Well Traveled. Today, our guest is America Ben. America is a former competitive cheerleader and gymnast and currently identifies as an athlete within the sports of weightlifting, sprinting, and dance. America, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
So just briefly, after that introduction, I was hoping that you could start by introducing yourself a little bit more and giving us a little bit of a background on your journey in athletics. So starting sort of from the competitive cheerleading and gymnastics to where you are now as a sprinter, dancer, and weightlifter.
Okay, so for the first probably 10 years of my life, we moved around a lot. So I didn't have like a sport that I really did. But I remember when I was around 8 years old, we were still on the East Coast. I noticed that one of my best friends was doing gymnastics. And me being a little girl, I'm like, oh my gosh, that looks like so much fun. Mom, please let me do it. And so I begged her to let me do it. She finally let me. We moved to California a few years later. And I started doing competitive cheer as well, which also stemmed from one of my best friends. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I've always been very like friend oriented. Like, I love being around my people. So it's like, if I can enjoy things with my people, it's very bonding, you know, like it forms a connection with people. And I think ultimately that's what I enjoyed most about gymnastics and cheerleading is the community. I loved it all. I loved feeling strong and powerful when I was a gymnast. I've always been a big tumbler. When I transitioned into cheer, I was a flyer, and that was something that I loved doing too. But it wasn't something that was sustainable because younger, smaller girls were constantly coming in, and the smaller and lighter you are, the more likely you are to be a flyer. So then a few years later, I'm getting older, of course, these younger girls come in, I get taken out of the air, and I'm just a tumbler. So basically my whole career in cheerleading and and gymnastics was tumbling. That was my main focus. So when I mean tumbling, I mean like flips, like running, doing a round off by handspring tuck, for example, like that.
Okay, so you started kind of as a young girl. It sounds like around like 6 to 7 to 8 years old. Is that right?
Yeah, I discovered gymnastics first.
Okay. Were you participating in any other like youth sports at the time, or did you have kind of an athletic like?
I remember I did like. I'm not sure if this is a thing anymore, but there's these like YMCA camps that my parents would put me in.
Like a summer camp kind of thing?
Yes. Yeah, and I would take multiple at a time, I would recall. So I did horseback riding. I loved that a lot. I've always been a movement type person. When I was younger, I was always running, racing little boys at school, telling them I'm faster than you. Come race me at the playground or something.
And you probably were faster than them,
was.
Huh?
So, I've always been competitive. I've always been an athlete. I've always wanted to, like, do something. But, yes, I did camps. I did horseback riding. I remember I did, like a little bracelet, like, crocheting thingy type camp. Like, I did so many. I did a swimming camp. And that's one thing, too, is growing up, I loved the water. I loved swimming. And then that transitioned into gymnastics catching my eye and cheerleading also catching my eye when I noticed that the people around me were doing it and having fun and enjoying it. And it looked like something I would have enjoyed too. So me being at a young age, I'm like, Mom, please let me do it.
Okay, so it sounds like you were just always very active. You always had like an intrinsic value and a joy in moving,
Yes.
whether it was, you found cheerleading and you found gymnastics, but before that it was horseback riding, just running around outside, like at recess, like always competitive, always just like having a joy of movement and being active, going to camps and stuff like that. And then you transitioned into doing the cheer and the gymnastics, where you started as a flyer because you were kind of younger and lighter, and then you transitioned into doing more of like tumbling as you got older.
So around the time that I was like doing cheerleading, I also started high school. Like fast forward, that's when I got taken out of the air. Around 14, 15, you start growing where you become an adult. You're starting to grow into an adult. So then I got taken out of the air.
Okay.
But I also was not big enough to be a base. I was in between sizes. So they took me out and put me in the front tumbling most of the time.
Okay. So because I'm not super familiar with cheerleading, there's then 3 main sort of specialties. There's like bases, flyers, and tumblers.
So not necessarily, but with cheerleading, there has to be stunt groups. So with cheer, there's stunts, and with gymnastics, there's not. So you don't have to worry about someone being smaller or getting taken out of the air or something like that. So
it sounds like from a young age, you were interested in cheerleading and gymnastics. You had some interest in other sports as well. And then as you progressed throughout your sort of young athletic career, from middle school into high school, things changed a little bit as far as your role within certainly cheer, maybe not gymnastics, but definitely within cheer.
Yes, so there aren't necessarily roles in cheerleading. Basically, it goes off of skill and size and weight when it becomes to stunt groups. So for sure, you want a very tall person as a back spot. You want like probably short to not super tall women as bases, and then the flyer themselves are going to be the smallest person because that is the person you're carrying and throwing and things like that. But that's not, if you're not naturally a petite person, so I went into cheerleading small because I was a kid, but then I grew into an adult and I wasn't as petite as I was before. So then these women would come in and they're much smaller than me. So then roles change. I was no longer a flyer like I was, and I was just a tumbler. So it felt like I was just doing gymnastics again. So tumbling has been most of my gymnastics and cheerleading career.
Okay, and how long did the gymnastics and cheerleading career last? Because now you identify more as now you identify more as a weightlifter, a sprinter, and a dancer. So was there like a clean transition, or like walk me through like how that happened exactly?
Okay, so I started gymnastics around 7 or 8, and then I stopped doing gymnastics around probably 13 or 14, transitioned into cheerleading until I was 18. And then once sports were over in high school, I had nothing to do. So then I noticed that one of my friends I noticed my friends, and so she had a coach. She was playing volleyball, and I remember her parents wanted her, she was trying to get a scholarship, and she's really good. So they hired a coach, specifically a personal trainer, and he helped her build a really strong body. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, you look amazing, you look strong, who are you going to? And so I got referred to that trainer from her, transitioned into weightlifting from there.
Okay, so you finished your career doing gymnastics and cheerleading after high school. You didn't pursue either one of those in college.
Towards the end of high school, yes.
Okay.
So I still had about 6 months of high school before I was trying to figure something out to do athletic-wise.
Okay, so you knew that those chapters were kind of coming to an end, and you were trying to figure out, like, okay, like, what's next? Like, what do I want to do? Because you clearly still loved being active and you had that athlete mentality. So then another big theme, it sounds like, is kind of your social connection with other people. And so you had another friend who was very good at volleyball, you said, who was going to a personal trainer. And then was that your first foray into like weightlifting?
Yeah. Like I had been in a gym before by myself, but I had no idea what I was doing until I went to a coach. This woman that I actually got referred to my old coach, she works at the same gym that I work at. She works at the same gym I work at, and she also transitioned to weightlifting like I did. So after high school, she did not pursue volleyball. She wanted to, but it was just not something that was actually, she felt that was realistic for her. So she went a separate path. She's also a personal trainer now, and she is also a powerlifter.
Okay. Yeah. And within the weightlifting realm, do you identify as like a powerlifter, bodybuilder? Like is it a hobby of yours? Are you like competing? Like talk to me about that.
When I first started, I would have considered like bodybuilding. I did compete in one show when I was 19.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And I say that the way I say it because I was not nearly ready. It was kind of a last minute decision. My coach was like, let me prep you for a show. It was kind of like a, I guess, experimental type thing. He wanted to prep someone for a show, and I was one of his first.
So you were kind of like a guinea pig sort of for this coach who was like trying to get into like bodybuilding coaching and thought that maybe you might be interested in that. And he kind of just like, he or she? He kind of like coerced you to kind of do this. Okay. And that didn't go very well, or?
He and I both did the same exact show, actually, together.
Oh, so he was competing as well?
He was competing with me.
Okay.
Yeah. So, after the fact, we both figured that we didn't like it.
Okay. Well, at least you kind of gave that a try.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the sprinting and dance that you're doing now as well.
Okay. So, dance has always been a part of my life. With cheerleading and gymnastics, it's incorporated in both. Since it's not really a focus, I didn't really get a chance to see if dance was something that I really liked. But it was always something that was on my mind. So same thing there was, I'll go up to my mom, play YouTube videos, and say, let me show you my dance moves. You know, such a good dancer at 10 years old?
It sounds fun.
Rihanna on the TV or something like that. And so that's where like all kind of stemmed from. And then when I really got into cheerleading, there's like actual dance routines. I found I really loved that. And then I also have always noticed like heels dancers on my social medias, and I've always like loved it. I love how fun it looks, how empowered they look, how confident they look. And honestly, like once I stepped into that realm, like it's not just a look. Like dance genuinely has built confidence in many aspects of my life, even like within my own personality and like who I am.
So it sounds like dance has been very impactful for you, even from a young age, when you didn't necessarily compete, but you were really enjoying like just dancing for fun, like putting on a video, dancing for your mom, these sorts of things. And so when you transitioned to your adult life, you kind of found out about these other disciplines and how empowering they made you feel. So it's kind of this combination of like makes you feel good, you love it. Sounds like, you know, kind of a good blend of things that would make you feel good. Okay. So that's kind of a little bit about your kind of background and where you are, you know, as far as physically and what you did, you know, pursuit-wise throughout your athletic career. Obviously, you're still involved in the sprinting and the dance and the weightlifting. I want to ask you this now. We're going to revisit this again later. Where can people find out about you and your journey? Like, do you have social media? Or are you doing any kind of coaching? Like, where can people find out about you?
So I do have social media. I have Instagram. Should I share it?
Yeah, if you're comfortable doing so.
Okay. So my name is America, just like the United States. Okay, it's spelled the exact same. And it's MADUU when it pops up, my name will show up as America Madueña Ruiz, and that one is me. And yeah, so I have my personal training up there. I have information about how you can start training with me, what my business represents, what I have to offer you. And I genuinely love working with people. I'm very much I love taking care of people, helping people, and getting people to where they want to be. So that's just another thing that pushed me towards personal training as well, was it brings me so much fulfillment to make other people feel good about themselves.
So career-wise, you're a personal trainer.
I'm a personal trainer. Yeah.
Okay. So people can find out about your personal training and your coaching programs, as well as DM you if they have any specific questions about any of the content that we're covering today, which, obviously stuff we've talked about up to this point, and then also anything maybe we're going to discuss later in the podcast. So I will be putting the details for your social media in the captions for the show, so that way people can kind of just click on a link and find you.
Perfect.
Cool. All right, so let's move on now. We kind of have an idea about athletically sort of what you've been up to, what you're currently up to. I want to talk about kind of the main course of what we're here to discuss today, which is the mental performance. Okay. So if you could just briefly share, did you have any standout moments or defining experiences of your athletic career, whether they were gymnastics, whether they were cheerleading, whether, obviously you talked about the show that you did. Now that was, I don't know if I'd call it necessarily a defining moment, but when I say that, do you have any sort of standout moments or defining experiences? And if so, did mental performance factor into those in any way?
Yes. So during the time that I was growing up doing gymnastics, cheerleading, I was also severely getting emotionally and mentally abused during that time. So that was kind of my escape, which was why my mind was always on athletics. It was always on gymnastics or cheerleading or whatever it was. So I didn't have to think about what I had going on at home with my mom. So my dad was not really part of the picture. He was kind of in the back, oh, hey, just sitting there waving. That was about it. And then my mom's in the picture. She stayed with me, but she had a lot going on that she did not address, which affected a lot of my athletic performance as well. So she put a lot of pressure on me because she paid a lot of money for me to do this. And I was very grateful that she paid a lot of money for me to do something that would make me happy. But I would have panic attacks every time before I went on stage when I did cheerleading. I remember being backstage and everyone was hugging, hyping each other up, and I'm in the corner breathing it out, pacing, trying to calm myself down, and just yeah, it was. I can't say that I enjoyed the competitive part of cheerleading every time I got on stage, because I did well in a gym environment, a cheerleading gym environment, but once it became stage ready, it was time to really put your talent to the test. So if I didn't throw a pass, if I just let myself get a mental block, I just don't do it, then I would get in trouble with both my coach and my mom. And it was really, it brought me down a lot, because I wanted my mom to be there to support me when I was having these mental challenges, but she was making it much worse by telling me that I'm ungrateful, I don't appreciate anything she does for me, and that she should just pull me out because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to anyway. And so there was just a lot of pressure on me for cheerleading, and I had spent so many years doing it, I felt like I wasn't able to stop, because she had also invested time and effort into it. She booked plane tickets for me. She took me to all my competitions, and some of them were in Florida, some of them were in Texas. She took time off of work, which she was a single mother doing for me. So it was a big deal for her, and it was a big deal for her to do that for me and to take time off. But it also felt unfair that the money was more important than how I felt.
Okay. So you, throughout the course of your life, have had an intrinsic value for sports and moving your body and being, sort of in these social activities. But it also sounds like another reason that you were involved in these sports was kind of as an escape.
Yes.
So it sounds like maybe there was some abuse going on at home. Maybe it was or not related to the sports, but certainly when you were performing, sounds like specifically the cheer aspect of it. If you were feeling anxious or you had a mental block about a specific skill that you were supposed to execute and you didn't do it during the show or the competition or the meets or whatever it was, it sounds like that sort of exacerbated or made worse the abuse.
Yes.
Was it emotional, physical, mental? Like what, do you want to share more about the abuse?
Emotional and mental abuse. There were a lot of threats for physical abuse, but nothing really over the top. I would say the worst that she did was she would grab my arms so hard that she would bruise me. And I was a little girl. So then she also wanted to hide the fact that she did that. So she wouldn't allow me to wear short sleeves to practice, to school. So she never did anything really bad physically to me. She would threaten to slap me, threaten to hit me, but never actually did. She would grab me and squeeze me really tightly and bruise me, but she didn't raise a hand to me. But she would manipulate me, gaslight me, make me feel that I was inadequate, that nothing I ever did was going to please anyone, let alone her. So she told me every time she got mad at me, she's like, so I've always been a very different person in general. Started when I was a kid, obviously. I was a little bit I would consider unique. At the time, I didn't like it because it made me, I didn't have a big friend group. I've never had a big friend group because I've always felt that I was a little bit different than most people. And not in a sense that I feel like I'm better. I just feel different, And so I've always just had this different part of me that I feel like kind of stems from the abuse, because my mom's abuse stemmed from her own insecurity and fear of the world. So her abuse in her eyes was protecting me. So basically she wanted me to not trust anyone else besides her. Anyone besides her was the enemy, including my dad, including my stepfather that she had just married. So the only person she made me believe that I could trust was her. And I did not feel safe with her. So every time I came with her was something that I felt that I needed to talk about, like a mental issue I was dealing with, especially with cheer and tumble blocks. She would just get mad at me. She would not try to help me through it, try to calm me down, get to the root of the anxiety. But the root of the anxiety she didn't want to get to because she knows it's her. So we would avoid all these things, and then whenever it would get brought up, I would be gaslit. It would be, well, it's because you did this. It's because you did that. And I remember growing up a lot, I was depressed a lot, and I expressed that to her a lot. Every time, I probably expressed to her 3 different, long periods of my life where I was just in a really bad depressive episode. And I remember when I was in those depressive episodes, I was very foggy. I didn't have any clear thoughts. I had a really hard time focusing. I didn't have good relationships, friendship-wise. And I just felt very, very lonely and isolated.
So it sounds like throughout the course of your life growing up, particularly with respect to your mother, who, in my opinion, our parents are supposed to be a safe place. Yeah. So first of all, that must have been a very difficult time for you in your life. It sounds like you dealt with a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, right? The people that were supposed to be able to go to talk to about things and feel safe, you were not able to do that. So my question for you then is, how did you, if you were able to, sort of cope with those things? Did you have any safe allies? Like, did you have anybody specifically that you could go to talk to about these things? And I'm going to sort of preface that, or sort of add on to that, like, for anybody that might also be going through a similar challenge to what you're going through right now, because from what I've heard about, you know, the gymnastics and the cheerleading community, like, it can be positive and supporting, but it can also be very toxic and pressure filled and negative. So I'm not going to say that it's all like that, but reasonably there might be some other people that are going through similar challenges to what you went through. So personally for you, how did you cope with those things? And, you know, do you have any advice for other people that might be going through similar experiences?
Rely on people. I can't say that I took everything that I could have for help. I definitely let myself be isolated. I did not necessarily cope with a lot of things. My way of coping was developing bulimia. So I had 2 escapes: bulimia and sports and body image. I was so hyperfixated on the way my body looked, which is why I developed bulimia in the first place. And the biggest advice I would give is to rely on people who tell you that you can rely on them. You can rely on people. People are there for you. People have your back and people love you. Like, you are not alone. And honestly, if you feel like you are, call me. Call me, text me, DM me. I don't care if I barely
reach out on your social media. That's a big reason why we're doing this, because you know, people might be going through similar experiences.
And do not let yourself spiral into something that could really hurt you. You know, that's part of why I started coaching too, is my eating disorder. I don't want because both men and females go through eating disorders. I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. Obviously, I can't save everyone, but if I can help, if I can guide someone towards a better route, towards getting what they want, then yes, just please come to me, ask me, say something. Just don't feel like you're alone. And I know it's a lot easier said than done to reach out, because I'm the same way. I have a hard time reaching out when I'm struggling. But I will repeat it over and over again. I'm here. I am here if you need it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that means a lot. Sounds like you kind of got into the personal training and the coaching maybe because you didn't have that when you were younger. It sounds like you didn't really have that many people to reach out to that were safe. Is that true?
I feel like, yes, that's very true. I feel like a big theme in my life is I've learned about myself that I get a lot of fulfillment from being a safe space for people and like caring for people. So we talked about earlier, I didn't have a safe space. I didn't have safe people to go to growing up. I was in my head a lot, and I had a lot of time alone growing up. So I spent a lot of time alone personally, which ended up with me spiraling and going down a route that wasn't super healthy emotionally and mentally. But the reason why I coach too is to create that safe space. Maybe someone doesn't have a safe space at home, and maybe the safe space isn't even the gym. So a lot of my clients, I'll go to their house, we can do that, or they can come into the gym, and if they're really not in the mood to move, I will sit with them for the whole hour and just talk to them, because I'm here for what they need. If today is not a day where you have the strength to push through a workout, then we can just sit here and talk if you need to. I feel like that's also a part of personal training, is allowing people to feel what they need to feel and talk about what they need to talk about, because a lot of the time they either don't have someone at home that they can talk to, or they don't feel safe with someone they can talk to. So the only time that they can talk to someone is when they come to me and train with me. So I always make it clear that it's a safe space. There's no pressure. Like, let me know what you need. We'll take care of it.
For sure. Well, I really empathize with that because I'm a personal trainer as well and a mental performance coach. So that's kind of like a hybrid career, so to speak. And in fact, if you've never thought about the idea of becoming a mental performance coach yourself,
that sounds,
we could talk about that maybe off the air, but it sounds like you're sort of already kind of doing that. Mm-hmm. I'd love to discuss with you a little bit more about and we're going to kind of get into some of that today. What mental performance techniques did you use, or how are you coaching your current clients? What are you sort of passing on to them? Which is to say, we'll get to that in a minute. I want to back up to the body image and the nutrition and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you mentioned this earlier, you developed bulimia. Mm-hmm. Okay. The body image issues that you had, were those self-developed, like self-realized, or was that put on you by, for example, your mother and your coach, like saying that you're not skinny enough or this or that or whatever? Talk to me about how that developed. Okay.
Was the first one.
And was that you saying oh, I'm too big now?
My coach,
your coach
said the words plain out. You're too big to be a flyer.
Did he or she mean that in a condescending negative way, or just
did.
A realistic, you're just too big and we have smaller?
She did mean it in a condescending way. She did that to a lot of girls on the team.
So she was calling you too fat?
Yeah,
or
and she did say that plain out to a
those
lot of
words,
the other girls. Yeah.
That they were too fat?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so from that point forward, you internalized that I'm too big.
Yeah.
Therefore I need to lose weight. I need to be skinnier. I'm too fat. I'm too big. Mm-hmm. This is a very common issue. I don't know the exact statistics, but off the top of my head, I believe that I read somewhere that 9 out of 10 women experience some form of body dysmorphia at some point in their lives. Yeah. And this is certainly not helped. This is certainly not helped by social media and Photoshop and editing. And you've probably seen the side-by-side pictures of Olivia Dunn, the gymnast. I think she's at LSU or something like that.
I have no idea. But
there was a big controversy around some photos that were posted of her, and she looks fantastic, right? As any collegiate level gymnast does. You have to be in phenomenal shape, obviously. And there were the real photos that were taken of her, and then there were the social media posted videos, and they were photoshopped. People did side-by-side comparisons, and you could see her waist was taken in a little bit, and her arms were thinned out a little bit, and the little extra this much extra skin underneath her chin was just tucked in a little bit more. And it's all a lot of people see is that on social media. And it's that's an unrealistic representation of what people actually look like. Yeah. So then that gets in a lot of young girls' heads, oh, I need to be skinnier, I need to be thinner, I need to be lighter, I'm too fat. Thereby, which is unrealistic, the only way to achieve that in a lot of cases is to have an eating disorder.
Yeah. So basically, the eating disorder was me taking things into my own hands, because I felt that I didn't really have control much else with anything in my life. It was definitely a control thing as well. Food was something that I could control. And how much I consumed, how much I didn't
control.
That I could control.
Okay.
Yes. So it started in control, yes. And then it developed into bulimia, which was out of control. Meaning I would have very severe binge episodes and very severe purging as well. And it was not always purging. It was sometimes that, or I would take other things like a crap ton of laxatives, or go on a few hour walk or something like that. Just having the need to burn it off, or I felt guilty or shameful. I remember after I would have a binge episode or anything like that, I just felt everything was blurry. I was just in a fog, and it just numbed me.
I'm wondering, was the bulimia a self-diagnosed thing, or were you actually diagnosed by somebody, or was this later you realized that you had it?
No, I got diagnosed and I got put into a outpatient facility.
Okay, so like rehab?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay.
I was able to leave and go home, and then I would go and have to spend the day there. I was there for a little bit over a month.
And this was when you were how old?
I was 17. I turned 18 while I was in the facility.
Okay. And how are you now with your body image and your eating disorder, if you don't mind sharing?
I don't mind sharing at all. So it took me years to recover from, like a very long time and a lot of practice. So even after I went through a healing journey, went through a residential type treatment for my eating disorder, I still struggled a lot after for probably like another 2 years. Like a lot of up and downs with it. So first, I was in regular therapy. And then when I was in therapy, I said something along the lines of hurting myself. So then she stopped what she was doing. She said, I can't help you anymore. I'm going to send you to a facility. Because once you say something along the lines of you're going to commit suicide, hurt yourself, anything like that, then I have to stop what I'm doing and either call 911 or call someone that can put you into a facility. So she called my mom. My mom was devastated because I had told my therapist many times that I wanted to die and that I didn't want to be alive and that I felt like everything was pointless and that this eating disorder was going to take over my entire life and it was never going to stop, and that I was just tired of it and I didn't want to do it anymore. So the bulimia happened, it started when I was around 16, like severely. I had body image issues ever since I had started cheer and gotten taken out of the air. I didn't develop an eating disorder until a few years later, and then I got put into a facility, went through a whole healing thing. They gave me a lot of coping mechanisms and how to work through episodes. But after the fact, I had a lot of lapses. So I never like fully relapsed. So a lapse it would happen for like a few days and then I would get back on track. So although I would get back on track, those few days felt just as hopeless as I did when I told my therapist that I didn't really want to be here anymore. When I would dip back into those like really deep holes of just depression, when I would lapse, I felt like just completely hopeless, back into like a blur. Everything was foggy, nothing felt real. And yeah, that's kind of...
Okay. Were you on medication at the time, or were there any other things that you were doing to help with, like, did you start seeing a dietitian, or how exactly did you recover? Was it just continued therapy? Did you just like pull yourself out of it? Like, talk to me about the recovery process a little bit.
So I did go to therapy, but I don't necessarily feel like the therapy really helped me through my eating disorder. I feel like I had to get tired of it on my own. I had to practice changing my mindset around the way I felt around food, and I also had to address where it stemmed from, which was the anxiety around it and how it made me feel. Because the issue wasn't the food itself, it was the way I felt about the food. So changing my thoughts around the food and what it's going to do to my body, meaning it's not going to make me fat. It's going to nourish my body. It's going to give me what I need. It's going to help me push through my next workout. So changing my mindset around it like that, ever since I changed my mindset towards, instead of just being an athlete or being just like doing gymnastics, a gymnast, like really changing my mentality to like a very athletic mentality, meaning you need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to drink your water, you need to take care of your mental health. So I feel like a lot of it also was just me not having a purpose as well. And I feel like a lot of my healing has been through finding my purpose and finding myself.
So it sounds like it was quite a journey for you to overcome the eating disorder.
Yes, it took years for me to get over it.
How is your relationship with food and your body image now?
Very good. So I base my food off of my performance now. So meaning I need to eat or I'm not going to perform the way that I want to. So especially now that I sprint, I have to eat. So my body image, for example, I've learned to do what I know makes me feel good for my body. For example, I won't wear clothes that I know that I don't like. I'm not going to force myself to try to wear something I don't want. I'm not going to restrict myself of something I want to eat because I'm more likely to go and binge on it than if I just went and had a piece right now that I wanted it, you know. So I think just changing my mindset around food and the purpose of food really helped me change my mindset around it, as well as changing my own narrative in my head. I was, up until probably a year and a half ago, I couldn't recall a time that I didn't have suicidal ideation or like thinking about dying, thinking about just not wanting to live anymore. But I realized about a year ago that those thoughts had stopped because I had trained my mind so well after like 4 years of doing this to be like, hey, you deserve to live. You deserve to have a good life. You deserve to have everything that you want. So this is not going to be your whole life. You are going to get past this. It's going to be hard, but it'll be worth it.
And if you don't mind sharing, how old are you now?
I'm 24.
Okay. So I only ask that for context because a lot of people that may be going through similar challenging parts of their life or athletic experience right now, whether they have eating disorders or body image issues or they're being abused by coaches or parents or significant others. First of all, you're not alone. If you need help, reach out to America first and foremost.
Yes.
Reach out to myself, reach out to anybody. Like there are people out there that care.
Yes.
First of all, and second of all, it's very challenging to go through these times in our lives, but understand that it's not going to last forever.
Yes.
You will recover from this. It might take
Years.
6, 7, 8 years, which I know sounds like a really long time when you're going through it. But understand that there is sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. There is another chapter.
Yes.
Working with therapists or mental performance coaches, not being afraid to try different types of medication or their mental performance techniques, meditation, mindfulness, breathing techniques, all these sorts of things. These are all avenues to helping you feel better.
And I also want to point out one thing to people too is there's nothing wrong with getting help. There's nothing wrong with needing medication sometimes or all the time. It's there for a reason. For example, when I was younger, I was afraid of taking medication, but I would have benefited so much from it if I just tried it. And now as an adult, I currently do take an SSRI for anxiety, and that has really helped me. It won't get rid of your anxiety, but it will make the daily tasks that you have to do much easier for you. You're not sitting there ruminating, thinking about it. I remember I would have such a hard time getting things done because I would sit there and think about it for hours and then I just wouldn't get it done. So take advantage of the things that are there for you. People are there for you. Lean on them. Even if you're not close, like I know a lot of people and a lot of people who are listening might not necessarily feel close to me, and that's okay. But I like to make sure that people know that I am a safe space, and I won't do anything that will make you uncomfortable. You tell me what you need, I'll be here. You want me to give you space, I'll give you space. You want me to be there and talk to you, I'll be there. Just take advantage of it because I'm here, other people are here. There's medication that can help you get past these really hard things in your life. And if you're someone who's afraid of maybe you don't want to be on medication for the rest of your life, like I have definitely thought about that as well. You don't have to be. You don't have to be. Right now, you might be in a stage of life where you need some extra support, and that's okay. It is not weak. It is not bad to ask for help. It's powerful to ask for help and to form community with other people and to take things into control. Like, this is not going to be your whole life. This eating disorder, this body image issue, this anxiety is not going to be your whole life. And it's going to take time to get through. And I know that we all don't really have a lot of patience, and we want to get things now that we want. But that time that you spend healing and working and thinking of these things will build character. For example, me, I went through, we talked about like 7 years of recovery, and I'm at a point in my life where I really like myself, and not much can really shake me. So those years that I spent very lonely by myself, I learned so much about myself, to the point where no one can tell me who I am. No one can take the core of who I am away, because I have built a foundation. I have built this confidence in myself that is so deeply woven into me that I just want to say it's so worth it. Just, you can do it. You can do it. Stick through it. Be as brave as you can. Rely on people, and you will get there. It takes time, yes. Be patient with yourself. Give yourself grace. You're going to hit bumps. You're going to mess up. That doesn't mean that you're a failure. You learn from those mistakes. You apply what you learn from those mistakes to the next step. And if you make a mistake again, you learn from that one, and you take it on to the next experience.
You've developed over time some more healthy coping mechanisms.
Yes.
Including being on some medication.
Yes.
And through the dark chapter of your life, you were able to develop a strong foundation through a lot of hard work and dedication to improving yourself, to the point that now you're probably as happy as you've ever been, or as close to as happy as you've ever been.
I'm the most me that I've ever been, which in turn, the more you know yourself, the more confidence you have, because you, to your core, no one can take that away from you. Nobody. Things like your car, your clothes, your money, that's something anybody can take from you at any moment. But who you are to your core will be with you forever, which is also why when I talk to my clients in particular, I don't focus on the way their body's looking. I focus on longevity. So you focus on building strength and athleticism and just a better mentality, your body will follow along. So it'll take time and patience, like I keep repeating, but that is the gist of it. You need patience, time, consistency, and just grace. Give yourself grace. You're going to mess up. You're going to hit bumps. You're going to upset people, and that's going to happen. But we have to learn to be okay with that, and that's life. Everyone has their own perception. So how people view you is their own internal world, and generally really has nothing to do with you. So the way someone receives you is not necessarily your responsibility.
Yeah. So to that point, about the patience that you were just talking about a minute ago, and the perspective and reaching out for help and developing confidence in yourself, like let's talk about sort of mental skills and techniques a little bit more here. So what do you know now? Like, what mental skills or techniques do you wish that you had learned earlier in your career, like 6 to 8 years ago, that you think would have been helpful? How do you think that those would have made a difference? Is there anything that kind of pops into your mind that you're like, I wish I would have known that when I was like 16?
My own perception of reality was distorted because of what my internal world was like. So I was very sensitive to the world, meaning everything would hurt me, everything I would get offended by. I would walk around just getting offended by everything when nothing is personal. I think one of the biggest lessons I had to learn was that everyone does have their own internal world and is going through their own stuff. Their perception is their perception. You can only do so much, meaning you be yourself, you can be your authentic self in the way someone receives you. Even if that's bad, doesn't make you a bad person. And with coping, I feel like the best way that I coped is by learning about myself and learning and developing more self-awareness and just being conscious of other people, being more aware of, hey, everyone has their own experiences and their own life, and I mean, I don't have any judgment on it. I know everyone has their own thing, and that's been a big thing too, is removing judgment from myself, so that removes judgment to the world, basically. It all starts with you.
So as far as like a specific lesson, you would say that you feel like at a younger age, you wish that you'd had more self-awareness.
Yes.
Okay. So for somebody that might be 16 and is kind of struggling through body image issues, or maybe they're dealing with abuse, these sorts of things. And it can be very difficult when you're in that scenario, because as we alluded to earlier, right, when you have parents, like, you're supposed to be able to trust them, and you sort of inherently believe the things that come out of their mouth. A lot of us develop our beliefs from a young age to what our parents say to us. Even if we're not, for example, even if we're not overweight or fat, even if we're very skinny, in fact, if our parents tell us that we're fat, in other words, the people that we trust, or that are closest to us, we're going to believe that, whether or not it's like objectively true. So I know it's easier said than done, and you said the same thing just a minute ago, but as a young girl or as a young boy that might be listening to this, or if you are a coach that's listening to this podcast, try to teach the lesson to younger athletes that they should have a sense of self-awareness. So try to reflect internally and how do I feel, about myself from my own personal perspective, rather than what other people are telling me.
It's important to really have self-awareness and know yourself. So especially as a younger person and people are telling you who you are and what you should be, you don't let it stick. Like, okay, I'll listen to it. All right, I want to let go of that. Or if it's something that's beneficial, I'm going to hold on to that. Being able to differentiate what really resonates with them and really doesn't.
And I'm going to offer a tool now from a coaching perspective. This is something that I like to use, and I advocate for a lot of my clients to use, and that is journaling. And the reason that I recommend journaling is because it allows us an avenue to write down and sort of look at or materialize or create something in front of us, in this case, words. And we can write down our thoughts, and it gives them sort of life. Now I can write down, what are people telling me about myself? Like that I'm fat, that I, am not good enough, all these sorts of things. And then I can write down on another page or in another column, like, what is actually true? And then if it can be difficult to separate, okay, but try to have some awareness of like, if I'm actually not fat and I'm comparing myself to other people, other women who are also lean, like, then therefore I'm not fat. So journaling is an avenue of kind of like creating something in front of us, and then we can go back and look at it.
I feel like it's a good way of organizing your thoughts. And the way that I think of journaling, because I journal, and I do recommend journaling to all my clients as well, it's like decluttering your brain. Meaning, especially if you're an anxious person and you have a hard time organizing your thoughts, writing them down will actually give you a lot of relief.
Did you use any mental performance strategies when you were a gymnast or a cheerleader? And because way earlier in the episode, when you were talking about like all your teammates like hugging, like pre-competition, and you were kind of just like breathing through it, you said, maybe you weren't aware that these were mental performance techniques at the time, but did you have specific things like looking back that you used, like breathing techniques that helped you get through difficult situations such as pre-competition anxiety? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I definitely have always used breathwork, whether I was aware of it or not at the time. I look back and I've always I would do that about 10 times before I would go on stage, and then right before we would go on stage, and then right before I started the performance. So breath work is so beneficial. And when we get anxious, it's a very common thing. We hold our breath. I used to do that when I got on stage. I would get on stage, take as many deep breaths as I could before, hold my breath for probably almost the whole time, on and off. And not to mention, from that, I developed this thing called, what is it called? Oh, athletic-induced asthma. I was like, what? But yeah, I had to end up getting a inhaler for that reason because I didn't breathe.
Fascinating.
Yeah. But you need to breathe, and breath work will really help you. First of all, calming your nerves down, giving you a clear head, organizing your thoughts, and being able to perform at your best ability, because if you have so much going on in your head before your performance, you're more than likely going to be anxious during your performance. So clearing your head, breathing, knowing what you're capable of before you go on is very important. And I think that journaling could also be implemented into that as well.
Yeah, so definitely, just like in the past 5 minutes, we've talked about 2 very key mental performance techniques or strategies that can be utilized in order to help not only feel safer and more confident and less stressed and less anxious, but will also enhance your performance overall. Breathing being sort of an immediate skill or technique that you can use really at any time. I mean, I find myself using breath work a lot because I've suffered from a lot of anxiety in the past. And for those people that don't know, what breathing does essentially is it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and relaxation response. We've got 2 main parts of the nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic being your fight or flight. So when you're feeling anxious and stressed right before a competition and your heart's beating crazy in your chest and you're sweating and you're, like hardly breathing, right? Like that's your sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight, flight, or freeze, as it can also be. So the opposite of that, which breathing, which is one of the only things that we have both conscious and unconscious control over as far as body functions. It's a very useful tool for activating your parasympathetic nervous system, because on command, I can lower my blood pressure and I can lower my heart rate and I can sort of ground myself in the moment, and it's going to relax my brain. I'm going to think more clearly. I'm not going to feel as stressed. So breathing definitely is a technique, whether or not anybody that's listening to this, whether you're an athlete or not, is aware of. Definitely use that technique to help calm yourself down.
And also walking outside in particular. Really, really beneficial for clearing your head, in my experience.
Care to expand upon that anymore?
Fresh air is very beneficial. I find that I breathe easier when I walk outside in comparison to like a treadmill or something, which there's nothing wrong with that. But for the mental benefits, I would recommend getting outside. And honestly, a hike in particular would probably be most beneficial, because it's getting your heart rate going, it's getting your blood flowing, you're out in the nature, and you just really have nothing else to focus on but you. And I recommend hiking because it also will bring you into a state of working, like you're working out. You're not just in your head. Let's say like you're just on a walk outside, you're more likely to like overthink or something. There's less obstacles in your way. When you're on a hike, you have a lot more around you that you have to be aware of. And I feel like just being outside in an environment like that brings a lot of just like perspective of the world in general.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of research that shows that the brain functions, I don't know what percent better, but it's significantly more active and functional after even just a short walk. But to your point about being outside, there's also the sunlight,
Yes.
you know, vitamin D and sort of the circadian rhythm and kind of waking us up. Birds are chirping, maybe there's water running, like a soft breeze, like going for a walk is a great opportunity to engage in mindfulness
Yes.
activities, sort of where you're being aware in the moment of other things around you, which is also going to take you out of your own head if you're dealing with anxiety or stress or these sorts of things. So absolutely going for a walk is a great suggestion.
Yes. And I have one more thing that I recommend for people to do every day, and it doesn't have to be something big, but it will help you build your mental. It will help you build more neuroplasticity in your brain. If you don't know what that means, it's basically growing your brain, getting smarter, being able to connect more neurons and have more abilities to switch your thinking and have more ways of thinking. Do something hard every day. Do something you don't want to do every day, and it will change your life. It does not have to be anything big. It doesn't mean you have to go and jump out of a plane and do skydiving if you don't want to. Go do your laundry. You're sitting on the couch right now doing nothing. You really don't want to get up. Get your butt up and do laundry. You are sitting on the couch doing nothing. Get up, go on a walk. You really don't want to, do it, but it will really help you. It has really helped me in particular push past the really difficult things in my life. For example, sprints. Every day is a mental challenge for me. I love to sprint because it's a challenge. So I get on there. I go for my first, second sprint. I'm like, oh, this sucks. I get about five intervals in, and I'm like, oh, I feel good. And once you get it done and you know that you can push past hard things, it translates into real life. So when something comes to you that you feel like you can't get through and you feel like withdrawing and just throwing in the cards, don't. Because
Right.
if you practice something you don't want to do every day, you're more likely to build up the resilience to do the things that you really need to do to grow and heal or whatever it is you need to do.
Yeah, so challenge is subjective.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is for somebody that's dealing with depression and anxiety, depending on the level of it, to your point about getting up off the couch or getting out of bed and going for a walk or cleaning your room or doing the dishes, that might actually be challenging for somebody that might be sitting here like, oh, that's not challenging at all. Like, what are you talking about? Like, challenge is subjective.
Yes. So like for me, when I was in really depressive episodes, it was getting up and taking a shower. Like that was hard for me to do.
So hard.
Yes. Like hard, difficult. It does not have to be anything crazy, and difficult and quote unquote hard is different for everyone as well. My skill level is different from your skill level. His skill level is different from your skill level. Like it's all subjective, like you just said.
But doing challenging things, no matter what they are, will help you build momentum.
Yes.
And this is a universal experience. You probably can associate with this. I know, for example, when I don't want to clean my apartment and I'm like, oh, there's so much. I have to clean my room and the kitchen, and I have to sweep, and I have to vacuum, I have to do laundry, the dishes, this, that, and the other thing. It's hard to get the ball rolling. But then once you start, it's just like, oh, I do this, and then I do that, and then I do this, and I do that. That is so applicable to other things in life as well.
Yes.
We're talking about cleaning your house or your apartment right now in terms of if you're depressed and that's difficult to do. But when it gets to more complex things, like starting a podcast or sprinting on a treadmill or whatever it has to do with like business or anything that's like more sort of objectively, I guess, complex, right, in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. When you build momentum by doing one challenging thing, you have that momentum carries over into doing other things. And this also speaks to the neuroplasticity that you were talking about and the growth mindset. And the more challenging things that you do, the more your body gets used to doing challenging things. And then you learn more and more and more and continue from there.
It goes along the same lines of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. A lot of people say
get out of your comfort zone. Growth, happens when you're out of your comfort zone. That's exactly what we're talking about, basically, in a nutshell.
Brain stressing and being anxious is because it might be something you're unfamiliar with. So if you get on a treadmill and you don't really know how to sprint, your brain is trying to figure it out. You're going to feel agitated because that is your brain trying to figure out something that it doesn't know yet.
You're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel a little stressed, a little anxious.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But the more you do it, the more you're like, oh.
That feeling is helping you grow, actually. So
Yeah. That's that feeling of difficulty and being out of your comfort zone is actually like the feeling of growth.
Yes.
And I've gotten to the point in my life where I used to shy away from doing difficult things. As a matter of fact, it's funny that you mentioned the skydiving thing because I'm in the process of writing a book, and that's like the first chapter of the book is actually when I decided to go skydiving because it was, and it doesn't need to be something like that for anybody that's listening, but when you engage in challenging things like that, your body learns and grows and understands that it can do those things. All right. So we talked about this a little bit earlier as far as, setbacks that you might have encountered along your way throughout the course of your athletic career. Athletics, as is life, but athletics in particular, since that's what we're talking about, has highs and lows, right? We're winning, we're losing, we're performing well, we're not performing well. Throughout your athletic career, how did you handle setbacks? Whether it was injuries, abuse, mental blocks, periods where you felt like you weren't really growing. Was there anything that you did specifically to handle setbacks?
When I was younger, I've always been a very schedule-oriented person. I like to, we mentioned earlier, it's kind of along the same lines of journaling, but organizing my thoughts on a piece of paper in front of me. Not a computer, not in my head, real in front of me. I wrote it out because that also, I find, and this is a proven fact, that things stick better in your brain when you handwrite them.
Right, like taking notes in a class or something like that.
Yeah, instead of typing here.
Right.
So what I would do is I would organize my thoughts on probably a piece of paper, and I would write out what I needed to do to get where I wanted. And those things, I feel like a lot of my healing, I don't have a lot of point blank, this is what I did to get over it, because a lot of it was intuitive for me. A lot of it was intuitive healing. A lot of it was just having to find who I really was. I feel like I didn't do anything really in particular that stands out to me in my head that helped me get through everything. I think that it took a lot of learning about myself and what works for me and what I need to do to heal in order to get through those things. So that's why it also took a lot of time, is because I feel like I didn't have the tools to really put in, hey, this is what exactly I need to do in order to get over this hump. There was really nothing that stands out besides me thinking a lot all the time about change. I really want change, and every day I would think about what I wanted for myself and what I wanted to change in my life.
When you were younger and both today as well.
Yes.
So one thing that you did do to handle setbacks or kind of help progress forward is writing things down.
Yes.
As we talked about earlier with the journaling, I think a lot of this is tying back into the self-awareness or self-reflection. I'm kind of sensing a theme here.
Yes. Intuition, self-awareness.
But it takes time.
Yes.
Right? And so to your point earlier about instant gratification and wanting things now, it can be very frustrating when we don't get things right now, because that's just our society right now is instant gratification.
Human behavior. We want things now and we don't want to wait for them.
Right. So I think just having the understanding that the best things or the things that we want are not going to happen right now.
Yeah.
And this is true with athletic pursuits, right? We're not going to win right now. You have to go through all the steps. You got to get past the first round to get to the second round. And then you got to get past the second round to get to the third round. You see this a lot all the time in competitive, basketball, football, baseball, like teams or players will throughout the arc of their career, they'll make it to the first round. They'll get to the playoffs. Like, they'll be a rookie. They won't make the playoffs for a few years. Then they'll get to the playoffs. And then they'll get eliminated in the first round. Next year, they make the playoffs again. Well, they've been to the first round already, so they kind of already know what to expect. So they perform better, and then they make it to the second round. Then they get eliminated that year. So, and then eventually, they finally make it. Not everybody, but sort of the best of the best will sort of make it to the championship round. And maybe they even don't win that year. And then finally they break through and win the next year. So it can take years to get to the goal that you want to. That's kind of a overarching like athletic example. But for you, it sounds like you didn't really have any specific techniques to kind of overcome the highs and the lows outside of the journaling and the self-reflection. Maybe you wish you would have had some better tools.
Yes, because like right now, I would love to give someone like the tools to get through something like this if they're struggling with something similar. But I can't think of anything specific that I did. I think that I made a lot of mistakes and I learned from them. So really being conscious of it's okay, you made a mistake. Take that mistake and apply it to the next time you go around, so you don't make that same mistake. And if you make a mistake again, as long as it's not this mistake, you're just fine. You're going to learn again. You learned here, both times you won.
Right.
Because you learned something, and then you can apply it to your future. And I did that over and over and over again. I have always been someone that I'm a very, I don't know what word to say, quirky person. I make mistakes. I say the wrong thing sometimes. And so I have always been in like my head about that as well. But growing up, I now have learned that these things about me are not like bad at all. And there were a lot of things that were considered like quote unquote bad about me growing up because they were different. But growing up and ultimately learning more about yourself is what's really going to give you that confidence. Like really knowing yourself, really removing the opinion of someone else talking over here, telling you who you are, what you should be. It's not up to them. It is up to you who you want to be in this world. And if you don't know, go try something. Go try something that kind of sparks your interest. It doesn't have to be something that's like you've always wanted to do. Maybe you don't have something you've always wanted to do. Maybe you just need to start somewhere small.
It's okay to not know things, generally speaking, but it's okay to not know things about yourself. It's okay to, I don't even really like to use the word fail. I don't really believe in the word failure, unless, to your point, you don't learn something. The first time that you do not succeed at something, I prefer to put it that way, rather than saying that you failed at something. First time you don't succeed, learn something.
Yeah.
And if you do that every single time, you're going to get better. So I think that's an important lesson for maybe the younger listeners or the next generation of athletes is to learn, have that self-awareness, have that self-reflection, and understand that you won't succeed every time. But each time that you don't necessarily get the outcome that you want, learn something.
Yes. And just because you messed up one time does not mean you're going to mess up every other time.
It doesn't define you.
It does not define you. So I think what I was going towards earlier was saying that I am someone who's always been okay with admitting my mistakes. I will admit when I made a mistake, when I said something wrong, when I did something wrong. And as an adult, I've learned to know that doesn't make me a bad person, that I make mistakes. It just makes me a human. And a part of the reason why I had a lot of anxiety growing up too is because I thought there was something like fundamentally wrong with me, because I felt so different, and I felt that I was making mistakes that other people weren't.
That was probably propagated by your mother and your coach, if I had to guess.
Yeah, more than likely.
Because maybe you had a tumbling pass and you didn't execute the skill that you were supposed to execute. Mm-hmm. Your coach and your mom would get on you about that and make you feel really bad. It's just as likely that the other girls or boys also didn't execute a skill and you just didn't realize it or weren't aware of it. And they were also making mistakes, but you felt like you were the only one that was making the mistake, right?
Yeah, and I felt that I was the only one who was doing it as often as I was.
Right. And in actuality, it was probably other people were doing it just as often, if not more often. And even if they weren't, there's nothing wrong with that because you were learning.
I think I was just more outward about it than anything, and not necessarily, like, I felt that it was okay for me to be outward about it. I didn't feel necessarily like shamed. The reason I felt that it was wrong was because my mom would get mad at me for it. Like, if I had gotten upset over something, I made a mistake. Because when I made a mistake, I would get upset. Tears would come out. I would feel sad sometimes. And that was never okay with her. So basically, I was never able to express it. It was all internalized.
It was either internalized or it was externalized. And then you say that you didn't feel shame, but I'm going to disagree with you because it sounds like you were being shamed, basically, for... Do we agree to disagree? Or
yeah, I mean, in the sense that, like, even though I was shamed, I do agree, I was shamed. It didn't make me stop being okay with sharing my difficulties and the things that I necessarily didn't do great at.
Well, I think that's really important, and I'm glad that you took me up on this opportunity to come on the podcast. And this actually transitions perfectly into the next question that I want to ask you, because as we've discussed so far today, your journey as a person and as an athlete has involved overcoming significant personal challenges, eating disorder, sort of mental, emotional, and borderline physical abuse. I know you said that your mom earlier, like, didn't raise a hand to you, but, like, in my opinion, if somebody's grabbing you so hard that they're bruising you, like, that's physical abuse, in my opinion. Anyways, right? How did those experiences shape your perspective as an athlete? And also, how do they sort of inform your approach as a coach and personal trainer now?
I think it impacted me in the sense that it makes me want to make others feel comfortable in this world, to be honest, because everyone belongs. I think that the experiences that I've gone through turned me into a very accepting person, very calm, and honestly, I'm a safe person. I feel that through my experiences and what I've gone through, I've been able to create a safe space for the people around me and someone that people can feel comfortable around and not judged around. Like, that's one thing about me is I will never judge you for anything, any mistake you perceive as a mistake. I'm never going to judge anybody. I don't care what it is. We all go through things, and if you need to talk about it, talk about it. And if you want advice, I'll give it to you. If not, I'll just listen.
So you feel like the experiences that you've had in your life, although they were very difficult to go through, have shaped you into a person that is very empathetic and understanding and very supportive. Yes. So you had a lot of negative experiences, and it sounds like you don't want other people to go through what you had to go through. So that informs your coaching practice. As a coach and as a personal trainer, you recognize that other people might be going through some similar issues, and so you want to be as open and as available as possible to. And you said this earlier, like, you can't fix everyone, we can't fix the world, but in our own small way, we can make the world a better place by being inviting and helping other people, as many as we can.
Yes. Ultimately, I think I've created a comfort zone. How
have the mental skills that you developed, the journaling, the self-reflection, the self-awareness. How have those mental skills that you've developed through the gymnastics and the cheerleading carried over into your life now as a dancer, sprinter, and weightlifter? Is there any carryover from what you learned when you were younger to what you're doing now?
Mentally, physically, both.
Open to interpretation.
I think the most thing that's translated is confidence in myself. Learning that I can choose to do and not do what I want at any given time. If I don't want to dance one day, I don't have to. Meaning, I would put a lot of pressure on myself growing up to throw a pass or be a flyer or something like that, or be really upset that I wasn't small enough to be a flyer, when in reality, that doesn't make me inadequate in any way. I know that as a dancer, a sprinter, weightlifter, I'm a different person. So stepping into each one of those arenas, I am going to feel different, and that's okay. And that doesn't make me feel shaken anymore like it used to. I would walk into a room, unfamiliar, kind of shaken, anxious. And now I step into arenas like I don't know, honestly. So I walk into a dance studio, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. I walk into the gym, I'm not nervous, I'm excited.
So you would say that the confidence that you developed from a young age has really translated over into your adult life.
So like I had mentioned, I think multiple times earlier, that taught me so much about myself and how my brain works, and has allowed me to kind of find ways that work better for me and better ways of thinking for me, so I don't have to go through as many difficulties as I did growing up. Okay,
that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about you as a mentor, speaking to a younger generation. Now, I know right now you're a personal trainer. You probably have adult clients.
Yes.
Is that right? So if you were going to be a mentor speaking to a younger generation of gymnasts or cheerleaders, or anybody that may sort of currently be going through any similar challenges that you've faced, how would you help them address body image, mental health, and resilience sort of at large?
I think that it all starts with having a solid structure of who you are. This is like a trend throughout the whole podcast, is who you are. Not letting people put you in a box, not letting people tell you who you are, not letting people tell you that who you are is wrong.
Even if it's your mom or dad or coach.
Yeah. And I know it's hard, especially coming from a mom, a dad, a coach, somebody close to you. But even them don't have the power to speak that over you. And I know, especially as young kids, when we're still developing and our brains are still growing, that it's hard to not internalize those things and let it influence our entire lives. But I challenge the younger generations to really just lean into themselves. And I think that to some that might sound selfish, but I think that the more you know yourself and the more confident you are, the better you can serve the people around you. The more solid you are in yourself, the more you can follow your purpose with confidence and a clear head. So I think that a big thing that really helped me succeed throughout this journey is getting to know myself, getting uncomfortable with sitting with my own thoughts and not distracting myself with anything, putting my phone down, dealing with my own emotions, dealing with things that I'm not necessarily comfortable thinking about or talking about. Getting comfortable with yourself, being comfortable with the parts you don't necessarily like about yourself, things that might seem different or ugly to you. No. You are you, you're unique, each person is different, and I believe that there's no perfect route, there's no perfect person to be. The perfect person to be is yourself. You don't need to do whatever they're doing, whatever they're telling you to do. Even your parent, even your coach. They do not, just because they are an older family member or they are an authoritative quote-unquote figure, it does not mean that everything they say is true and that you should believe it. Because if you feel that that is wrong, listen to that. Your intuition is telling you that that's not for you. And the more you resist it, the more anxious you're going to feel, the more lost you're going to feel. And I would hate for any of you to feel that way. And I know that some of that is inevitable and a lot of that is part of life and it builds character. But my advice would be to just be so solid in your own core that no one can shake you. And that takes time to build. But I'm saying it now because I think that you should start now. Even if you haven't started, if you don't know where to go, if you don't know what to do, ask questions. Like we mentioned earlier, people are here to help. I'm here to help. You have questions about anything, I will answer them gladly for you. I'm not going to charge you to talk to me for an hour. Like, no, just come talk to me. Call me. It's okay.
I think sort of the point that you're trying to convey is that intuitively, if an individual feels that something is off, specifically if that feeling is generated by another person, whether it's supposed to be somebody that they trust or not, a parent, a coach, a sibling, we know ourselves best.
Yes.
And to your point, we're all unique. We all have our own quirks. We don't fit into the box that somebody else creates for us, even if it's our parents. And at a certain point in our lives, and I believe it's before 18, because that's sort of the general age at which like you become an adult, quote unquote, and you move out of living with your parents. I think, you know, I don't want to put an age on it, but definitely to the point that we're trying to make here, at a younger age, I don't know, 13, 14, 15, maybe high school is when this starts to be a good time to do it. If you feel like somebody is trying to make you somebody that you're not, or if somebody is saying things to you that you don't feel validated in them saying about you, reflect on that. Don't go to social media. Take some time to reflect. If there is somebody that you trust, a friend or a different family member, or if you don't have either one of those, like reach out to somebody like one of us, for example. Become your own person. And that doesn't need to happen at age 18. It can happen much younger. And that's a big part of what we're trying to convey through this podcast.
And when I say that my advice would be to find who you are to your core from a young age. It's not meant to, okay, I'm 15 years old, I have to figure out everything. I have to figure out what I want, who I want to be around, blah, 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 whatever it is. I'm saying start there. Start thinking there. Plant the seed in your brain as soon as you can. You don't need to know exactly who you are within the first month, within the first year, within the first 5 years, if you can't. If you need time to find yourself, take your time. There's no rush. There's no time frame for success in this world either. There's no, okay, at 20 you need this, by 30 you have to have this. No. You want to go back to school when you're 35? Go back to school. You want to go back to school when you're 45? Go back to school. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get better at any age of your life. But from where I started, just plant the seed. You don't need to know exactly from the beginning. And you have to, and I think that something that gives people peace, and it gave myself peace, was being okay that I wasn't going to find it out right away. It was being okay with the fact that this is going to take time and that I just need to breathe, like we mentioned earlier, and take one step at a time.
Not feel anxious or stressed that you're not going to get the results that you want immediately.
Yes, and that's natural. You're going to feel it regardless.
Right.
You're going to feel anxious, antsy, because you want it.
Right.
And that stress is going to get you there. And that feeling of anxiety and stress is you growing. That is you on your way towards growth.
Yeah, you can use that as a motivating factor. In fact, I do that all the time where when something, I feel those kind of like butterflies or jitters or stress, that I've actually learned to use that as a motivator for like, this is something that I must do. It's like a call to action. I don't know if you feel that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's talk a little bit about the transition of life from an athlete to sort of retiring from athletics. And I know you're currently a weightlifter, a sprinter, and a dancer, but at some point everybody has to sort of retire from athletic pursuits, whether it's in their 20s, 30s, 40s, like you said. Everybody's book is different. Don't compare your chapter to somebody else's chapter. Everybody's life is different. But if you had to say, what is one important mindset or skill that you think young athletes should develop to prepare for the challenges of both sports and life after sports? Are there any techniques that are coming to mind that you think would be useful for competing, but then also when it's time to sort of move on to other career goals in your life?
Find what works for you. And if you can't do your sport anymore, find something you can do that's not going to hurt you. You know, at some point, like you mentioned, we might have to retire. As we get older, our bodies don't necessarily keep up like they were when we were in our 20s. So
Sadly,
that's just how humans are, and that's life. Obviously, we can take measures towards slowing that aging process down, like building muscle.
And eating healthy and sleeping the appropriate number of hours of sleep per night.
Yes,
and
there's so many factors.
Hydrating and these sorts of things.
Yes.
So as far as, you know, the most important mindset or skill that you think that people should develop from going from competitive sports to life beyond athletics, would you say is just sort of finding your passion and sort of channeling that?
That's part of it, yeah. But I think that your passion isn't necessarily who you are, because I am a sprinter and a dancer and a weightlifter, but that's not who I am. I mean, I want you to find who you are. Like, what are your characteristics? Meaning, for me, I'm intuitive, I'm caring, I'm quirky.
Okay. So you love to learn, you have a growth mindset,
Yes.
you love competition, and not competition necessarily, but you love challenge.
Yes.
So that is something that can be applied to both athletic pursuits and then afterwards.
Yeah.
So intuitive growth mindset and loving a challenge, like that can be applied to a career, it can be applied to learning new skills. It doesn't have to be. So would you say that those are some good skills to develop?
Like intuition, things like that.
Yeah. Like
yes, absolutely.
being in touch with what feels good for you.
Yes, and contrary to some belief, you can teach intuition. I think that it's not necessarily a skill that you have to be born with. Some people are. That's okay. Some people aren't. We can teach you. I can teach you if you want.
How would you go about teaching intuition?
Well, it all starts with the person and who they are. So it would really depend on the person, on where I would start.
Okay, so as far as teaching intuition, we're talking about, so when you say like being intuitive about something, like being curious?
Being curious. And first of all, I would probably start with like sensations. So when you have a feeling, what do you feel in your body? You know, like when you feel angry, where do you feel it in your body? Because we do feel it in our bodies, but that's just not the focus. Like when we're angry, I'm not like, oh, like my side hurts. Like, no. Like when I'm anxious, I can feel my stomach tighten. I can feel myself sweating. I can feel myself like blanking. Like when I get nervous, I feel like I blank on my words. I'll start sweating, things like that.
Okay, so being intuitive is a good skill to develop because it's helpful for your pursuit as an athlete, but then also when you sort of graduate or retire into, we'll call it sort of everyday life, being intuitive about what feels good for you career-wise and relationship-wise and, you know, where you want to live and financially, all these kind of things.
Yes, as an athlete, yes, you are. That's a very healthy thing to do, keeps your body healthy. But beyond that, I feel like when you can no longer do as intensely those things that you want, to really also just look at the people you are surrounding yourself with, all the things that you're taking in every day, your little habits that you do, like when you wake up in the morning, are you going right to your phone? Just pay attention to the little things in your life that are definitely like causing basically what your life is that you're not really realizing. So you're waking up in the morning, going right on your phone, that might make you anxious for the rest of the day. You are getting up and you call your mom every day for the first thing in the morning, and you're stressed out for the rest of the day. So maybe that call should not be the first thing in your day. Or you should set a boundary with whatever that is, whatever that person, whatever that thing is, so you're not letting it take so much out of you, and so you can actually do the things that you want with your life.
The theme of self-reflection is coming up again.
Okay.
So being intuitive, in other words, or being aware of how things make you feel, it's all these little habits and little things that happen to us throughout the day that I think a lot of people are just so caught up in thinking about the past or thinking about the future and not being in the present moment and not being aware of how these little actions, these habits that we have are actually impacting who we are. As we get close to wrapping up here, if you could leave our listeners with one key piece of advice about mastering their mindset or mastering the mental game, whether it relates to athletics or life in general, what would that be? What would that one key piece of advice be?
Learn to hone out the noise. Learn to dial in. That's one thing. I think that the word focus and the words understanding are also things that need to be taught, because a lot of people don't know what focus is. So learning how to focus, and I would also say that everyone gets there in their own different way. But I would say also to listen to your gut, listen to your intuition, listen to how your body feels around certain people, how your body feels when you eat certain food, when you do certain things in general. Pay attention to how you feel, because if you pay attention to how you feel really closely, your body will tell you what's for you and not for you. And I'm not saying that go lift a piece of weight and yes, that hurt your bicep. That's not what I'm talking about. Yes, working out is going to hurt your muscles. That's the point. But I mean things like, you normally go out every Friday with your friends to a bar, and you always end up leaving unfulfilled. You just feel like sad after the fact. Listen to that. Listen to that feeling. You probably don't really want to surround yourself with those people, or if you don't necessarily want to break yourself off from those people, change your habits and the environment that you put yourself in. I think that's a big factor. Pay attention to the people that you surround yourself with. The environment you surround yourself with matters. Pick a correct gym that you feel good in, because that environment matters. Pick the right people to surround yourself with. Choose your friends wisely. Do not settle for anything just because you feel like, oh, this is my only friend, or I have no friends. You are better off being your own best friend until you find people that actually care and have similar values to you and really want to get to know you. So ultimately, listen to yourself and listen closely, because sometimes it's hard to hear through all the noise. So the theme is self-awareness, intuition, and focus.
Okay. And I think that's where the idea is to kind of go full circle what we talked about earlier with the journaling and the writing things down. Those can be really invaluable tools, because to your point that you just made, there's a lot of noise out there. There's our parents, there's our coaches, there's our friends that may or may not actually be our friends. I mean, I know myself, I've gone through different friends. It's always awkward to break up with friends, by the way. I don't know if you've ever had that experience.
I have multiple times.
But it's like breaking up with a significant other is like, it's its own behemoth of a task to go through mentally and emotionally and so forth. But breaking up with friends is just like weird.
Yeah.
But it needs to happen because friends will come and go and they will serve their purpose in our life at a certain time. But then there will come a time where they don't align with what our priorities are anymore. And I like what you said about sort of being single or alone in certain situations. It's actually better to be alone with yourself than with a toxic friend.
Yes.
So the overarching theme, I think, that we're kind of looping back to again and again is self-reflection and intuition and focus and listening to what speaks to you. You might have other people in your life, parents, coaches, friends, teammates, but even if you're at a point in your life where you are a little bit younger and you might be struggling with some of these sorts of things, come back to yourself. Yes. What feels good to me? What feels right to me? And it will take some time to figure that out and understand that.
Yes.
But start trying to figure that out now if you haven't already.
Yes. Yes. And you need to be able to be whole on your own. So let's say you get a partner. That's not your other half. They add to you, but if they're no longer in your life, you're not half empty. You are still you. So a good thing to do is also not overextend yourself for people who you really just don't mesh well with. Do not try to be someone that you're not just because someone is telling you, well, I'm not going to be your friend if you're not this way, or they're not spending time with you because of a behavior that you portray that is not necessarily detrimental. They just don't like it. So, yes, it's not worth losing yourself over. No one is worth losing yourself over. Do not overextend yourself for a relationship. It is not worth, ultimately, you. This is your life. This is the only life that you get. And you have to cherish it. You really do. And part of that is getting to know yourself and knowing who you are to your core so no one can shake that.
Find yourself and be yourself.
Yes. And the people who love you are going to love you for who you are. So don't be ashamed of any of your quirks or any part of yourself. Every person has a unique gift to give to the world. So embrace it.
Absolutely. Well, America, let's repeat once again for our listeners, where can people connect with you? I'm going to put the notes down below, but if you could just repeat your social media or anywhere that you're comfortable having people reach out to you.
So I am most active on Instagram, and if you DM me, I'll message you right back. If you want to DM me to get my phone number, we can do that, but I am not going to put my phone number on this podcast.
No, definitely not.
So my Instagram, though, is America, America, Madu, Maduu. When you pull it up, it's going to say America Madueña Ruiz. And that's how you can find me. Perfect.
All right, America. Well, it's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Did you have any last closing thoughts?
No. This was really fun. Thank you for having me. And I hope that the people out there can really get something from this.
Absolutely. I think they will.
I hope so.
Thanks again. Have a great day, okay? Thanks for being here.
You too.
All right.
Justin.
Bye-bye.
Bye.